Well, hey, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast. Pastor Joseph, glad to be with you here on this next episode of the Advent Podcast, looking at what makes Christmas Christmas. Delighted to have Pastor Chad Hyatt from Mercy Community Church. Glad to have you with us.
Hey, glad to be here.
And our very own Virginia Sowell on our church staff and doing lots of missions and service things. Glad to have you with us as well.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about looking at mutuality in mission and service. One of the historical things about Advent and about Christmas, in all of our Christmas stories, Bob Cratchit, all these different things, there's always some sort of need or opportunity to see people in a different way. The ghosts that visit in that story help remind people about what's important. It's not necessarily money, it's about doing right, being good to one another, and reminding us of what the point of Christmas is. During the season, there's so much happening in the life of people and the things you need to go out and get and buy and do. It's a certain level of stress and anxiety. One of the things in our conversation today I hope we'll get to is talking about how there's a lot more to Christmas than that. I think we all know that cognitively, but then we show up in the holiday season and all the frenetic, all of that, and family things and the expectation levels. And so sometimes it's helpful to have something to draw us back into, reminding us what Christmas and Advent is about. And so I'm delighted to have this conversation with you all about sort of mutuality in mission and service. A big part of our work here at the church is mission work. We see that not simply as like a thing you do on the weekends, but a part of how you want to live your lives. And so one of our mission partners is Mercy Church, Mercy
Absolutely.
Community Church. And so Pastor Chad's going to help us understand a little bit about people's experience there, some of the folks who run your church and help make it happen. And then also Virginia talk about how we partner well with you all in doing a mobile soup pantry, mobile soup kitchen. Mobile soup, we just call it mobile soup, right?
I like it.
Yeah.
And so, we'll get in the conversation. But before we get into that part, I do want to do a little bit of like, who are these folks? This is what we do on every Advent, every podcast episode. Which one of you would like to go first on the thumbnail sketch of who are you?
Everybody knows me. You start.
Okay. My name's Chad, and I'm a pastor at Mercy Church. Have lots of loves and interest in terms of music and reading. But my real passion is church, and my real passion related to church is justice, because I feel like that's kind of like why we're here. That's me.
Awesome. And is there some of how you wound up in this role in pastoring? I know you went to school for these things. You went to Emory, as I did, and we met when I was working there. But say a little bit about sort of family or other things you want to share about how you ended up sort of at Mercy specifically.
Well, at Mercy specifically, started it because I was at another church, really kind of a big mega church here in the city, and I was associate pastor and worked in education, worked in a lot of different areas. And we were looking for a mission trip for our folks who were in the school. And we didn't want to do something that was just kind of like, let's go and just talk about the gospel. It was more, we wanted to really experience how others were embodying the gospel. Our church was connected to the missionaries of the poor, which I always kind of describe as like Mother Teresa, except guys. It was based in Jamaica. And it was really a life-changing experience. And that was a time at which my wife and I were really praying about what God was calling us to do specifically. There were some things happening, transitions in that local church, and we're like, what is God calling us to do? And smack in the middle of that is when we had this experience, or I had this experience in Jamaica, very Matthew 25, very much, Jesus says, hey, if you've done it to those that the world calls least, then you're doing it to me. If you're sharing your food, if you're welcoming the stranger, if you're visiting the sick. I realized that's what I needed to be doing, right? Like I felt like I was sitting behind a desk. There's a place for desks. We're sitting behind a desk even now. There's a place for that, but that stirred who I felt called to be, like from when I was a kid. Like my heroes were folks like Jimmy Carter. My heroes were folks like Mother Teresa and St. Francis, but also like Martin Luther King Jr., Bobby Kennedy. Like I grew up wanting to change the world. And felt called into pastoral ministry, and then felt myself doing a lot of great things, but so often stuck in an office behind a desk. And in Jamaica, you're literally caring for the bodies of those who are suffering, and trying to give some peace and comfort And I thought, this is what I'm called to do. And so, long story short, my wife and I decided to start Mercy. And we started in the living room. We sold our home, moved downtown next to the Open Door community, which is a great community. Yeah. Really kind of showed us how to do a lot of the things, because Jamaica and Atlanta are different, and the ways that poverty affects people. It's very, very different. And so when the time was right, we said, hey, we're going to start in our living room. And that's what we did. And 18 years later, we're still here. Not in our living room, but still doing the work.
That's awesome. And Open Door Community was, when I was in Emory and working with college students, that was a huge part of the work of the Methodist Campus Ministry, was trying to partner and do well. But an amazing legacy of ministry, and it's wonderful that you all sort of learned and picked up things and sort of keep carrying on the work there in the Poncey-Highlands area. When I've been down there, when I went with y'all, I saw some of the same folks that I knew when I was, but
For sure.
Interestingly,
For
they
sure.
they were on your leadership teams.
Absolutely.
And helping serve.
Yeah.
And so when you think about like that, the long-term relationships that you all have in your church and community there, everyone knows everyone.
Yeah.
It's really interconnected in those beautiful kinds of ways.
Absolutely.
It's helpful.
It's all about relationship.
Well, that's great to hear, Pastor Chad. Thanks for sharing that part of your story and how you got involved in starting Mercy Community Church. And that's pretty awesome. Well, Virginia, it's your turn to tell us a little bit about who you are and sort of what you do here at the church, but also how you got connected with Mercy.
I've been working at the church about 23 years, and when I first came here, I heard about the mobile soup kitchen, and I thought, what a cool ministry. It used to be a bunch of people made sandwiches on Tuesdays and put them in a van and drove down to 4th and Juniper and served. When the area became more gentrified, they asked us not to come anymore, so we hooked up with Redeemer Lutheran and served there for 10 years, coming once a week and helping with serving people right in their building in the basement.
Nice.
And then when that time came to end, we heard about Pastor Chad. And I remember Madge Watson and Lewis Miller saying, well, he actually goes out on the street with carts and feeds people who live on the street. Would that be okay? And we said, sure, that sounds great. So we started doing that on Fridays, and Mercy had to stop being open Fridays, and Pastor Chad said, you all have done this long enough, would you be willing to just take Friday by yourselves? And we said, sure. So we have a very, very faithful group of people who come in and make our sandwiches and pack our bags for delivery, and then several of us go down on Fridays in the church van, which is nice because the folks will say, oh, there's Oak Grove, we know you're coming, we always know you're coming. So it's they look for us, they know that we'll be there with food, but also with just a chance to kind of chat and catch up and talk and see what their needs are. And sometimes their needs are pretty simple, and we'll come back and say, oh, John needs a backpack, or
Sure.
somebody would like to have a tent, and we put it out there, and miraculously it appears. Somebody always donates it. Yeah. Whether they're a church member or just someone associated with our community, they're aware of this ministry, and it's just kind of cool to me that lots of people are involved in it.
Yeah. And when I got here on the church staff 6.5 years ago and met you and got to work with you and helping do all the communications things you do and the bulletins and all the slides, and in case you don't know, that's how all this happens, is Virginia does all this with her amazingly talented hands and computer skills and graphic design, and in helping us communicate things well. A part of our job in pastoral ministry is communicating things. That's how this podcast got started, was folks wanting additional ways to get to know people and to get to know how we work in our communities as a church, how we live out that call to love God and our neighbors. So the mobile soup group, on Thursdays, we have a group that comes in and makes sandwiches. So Warren and a whole host of teams of people who rotate in and out of that group. And y'all are so faithful and awesome. So shout out to our Thursday folks making sandwiches.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And also to our Friday team who comes in and gets things out and heads down in the bus. It is sort of, I've been a couple of times and been there to see it and take some pictures and video. And it's remarkable because when I was there and watching you all interact with folks, You all know them, they know you, they're asking you about your life, you're asking about their life, and that mutuality. A big part of this podcast conversation, and we're hoping to help you all be invited to, is thinking about how when we work with folks who are different than us, folks experiencing poverty or homelessness, what do we have in common? How is there mutualism in how we do things? A big sort of part of school of thought in asset-based community development, ABCD, is that the gifts that are already needed or a big part of making that community thrive already exist in the community. And so it's not that an outside force needs to come in and bring something like expertise or even finances or money necessarily, but to come alongside and partner well with folks who are already there living the day-to-day and know that.
Absolutely.
And so Mercy provides our church that opportunity, and you all do it so well, and that's a great gift to our church and our community as well.
Yeah, and if I could just kind of jump in back into the story a little bit, because I think it helps to illustrate this, is the mutuality is in the partnership.
Absolutely.
Right? And so it was because you already had an established ministry, but didn't have a place to be because of changes.
Right.
And so I think it's a really important aspect of ministry is to create space for others in their ministry. Like that's the mutuality of the partnership, right? You're doing something good. Well, how the heck can we help you do it? Right. I mean, like to me, that's a no-brainer. And then the transition came to Fridays when the Open Door closed its doors, right? And so one of the things that we had traditionally had in our neighborhood was there was at least a meal every day.
Yeah.
And so part of our thinking was, well, how can we shift, and try to not take on extra days that we couldn't handle, but how can we shift our resources and our personnel and our community, and knowing that you guys you could come out on a Friday when we're not there and you can handle it. Like, we don't need to be there for you to be there, right?
We interned with Mercy long enough to figure out how to do it.
Because that's relationship, right? We know each other. We figure out how to do things together. We make space. And then we respond to needs as they arise, because needs are going to happen in ways that aren't calculated. So
you never know. I mean, one week we were there and a gentleman pulled up his shirt and told us he needed a new colostomy bag. And so we went and got him some.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I mean, it's not your typical ask.
No, it isn't. But it's a real need.
It's a real need.
Well, and y'all do such a wonderful job at Mercy and in Virginia and your team working with folks to understand what the needs are, and also, again, the opportunities, the things that they're gifted with that allow us to, again, participate in that love of Christ that we see literally happening. When I showed up to riding in your car that time to help sort of get things started with the van coming behind us, we rolled up and there were already folks waiting there. And like, I got that. And go ahead and unload all the things. And then they're the folks who are making sure everybody knows where to be. And they're the ones with the knowledge.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And with the innate knowledge, so-and-so's not, and they grab a couple of sandwiches, know where that person is, go find them. And that relationship and caring that I just saw the one time I'm down there filming and trying to make a little short film about it. The remarkable part is the care you all have for one another and how important that is, but also just it's a real and tangible way people experience God's love.
Exactly. Yeah. And it goes back to the point you were making earlier that lunch counters, any kind of counter can divide, right? We think back to the civil rights movement, we think back to the sit-ins, and we think back to the integration of the counters and all those kinds of things. And I think in ministry, often that we call mission, which I think church is mission. Like, if the church isn't missional, then is it church?
Yeah, it started as a movement, and it should still be.
It should still be a movement, right? Yeah. Exactly. And so the church is a movement. The civil rights movement is a movement. Counters divide us. Like, who's on this side and who's on that side, right? Who's serving, who's being served. And when you can obliterate that, when you can say, hey, it doesn't matter who's on which side, when I'm able to share the meal that we're all sharing together and not just providing it, when I'm able to serve whoever is serving, then all of that creates a kind of community where there's ownership. We cannot do the work we do unless it's a community. It takes all of us working together, whether it's partners at other churches or it's within our own community and the ways in which people jump in and help out each and every day. Like, that's how we get things done. That's how mission happens. That's how the movement keeps moving.
Yeah, we loved that. During the when the pandemic started and the lockdown happened, Mercy Church was suddenly flooded with 3, 4, 5 times as many people coming. And I was feeling very useless. And Pastor Holly actually asked if I would come down and volunteer once a week, and did, and really, really enjoyed the fact that, everybody, we're all susceptible to COVID, but these people still need to eat. And everybody still needs to have physical contact with each other, even if it's from a distance with a mask on.
So we're really, really grateful because, again, it's that relationship that happens that's so vital. But the pandemic was a significant challenge for us because you can't just go online. You can't close when folks are depending upon food and also just pastoral care. How do you abandon folks in the midst of a crisis? So, so you've got, how can we keep folks safe, because the public safety risk is real. Yeah. But also hunger is a public safety issue as well. And, sheltering in place when you don't have shelter. So shelter is a public health and a public safety issue. And so, we just made the commitment to figure it out, and it was exhausting, but I think we were faithful, and it's because of partnerships. I remember Madge and others helping to provide soups, and hey, Chick-fil-A, can you provide some chicken soup? Because we were serving more people than ever before, because a lot of places made the decision to close down or to not serve in person.
And also during the times when it was so cold, shelters were not free. Shelters weren't open because of the pandemic. And so Pastor Chad said, we need sleeping bags, but not any sleeping bags. Right. We need waterproof 0-degree sleeping bags to keep people alive. Yeah. And Oak Grove did a sleeping bag drive. Yeah. Other churches did too. And I remember hearing Herman talk about waking up in his sleeping bag and there was snow on him. Wow. So, and he goes, I was still warm. And so that was a wonderful thing. Yeah.
And all the things we do at Oak Grove, any of our mission projects that involve like coat drives and warm-up Sunday, you all participate and receive from that. It also gives all of us the opportunity to participate in that, helping keep people warm. I remember when that call went out for the 0-degree waterproof bags, and it was like, okay, let's go. Because people were looking for ways to connect with other humans and to know they're actually helping something for someone. One of the largest things that I think all of us saw in the pandemic and during lockdowns as well was this sense of isolation that people experience. For folks who are out on the streets and experiencing homelessness, one of the biggest things is not feeling seen or heard or touched. Yeah. And so you think about this sense of isolation. If you are someone who is single and lives alone, perhaps, older adults also experience this sense of not connectedness, no belonging. Yeah. And so a big part of church in general, I joke that you're welcomed at 3 places: Walmart, Moe's, and hopefully church. Welcome to Moe's, welcome to Walmart. Yeah. But it is like in the olden days of going to a store, you were welcomed. How can I help you? Yeah. It's just that's not how things are now. Yeah. But when you come to church, you ought to be known and welcomed. Our youth group theme is known and loved, because we want people to be known and loved. And your community exemplifies that in so many ways.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
It really does. And it's funny to think about volunteering and helping, and I realize that I am helped way more than I give. So it's always a wonderful experience, and it's so nice to get down there, and I know their names, they know my name.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's just
because it's relational.
Wonderful.
Yeah. You're not doing something for an unseen other. You were seeing a human being. And you're relating to that human being. The human being may have a gift for you, or you may have a gift for them, but like it's seeing and knowing each other in relationship. And that's...
Well, one day I was down there, and I told Pastor Chad when I was leaving, I said, I didn't do a dang thing all day. I didn't do dishes. I didn't clean anything up. I didn't empty the trash. I did nothing. And I just sat and talked to people. And Pastor Chad said, well, that's the ministry of presence, and that's important too.
Yeah.
So,
well, it is the most important thing.
Yeah.
In seminary at Emory, one of the things we learned about was the charismatic presence of Jesus. It was Jesus just showing up and hanging out and eating with people, being present. And the joke then and now still was, 80 or 90% of ministry is just showing up and being present and available for people. And so when you think about how relationships are formed and people get to know each other, it's not necessarily the worship service or the Bible study where you get to know people. It's those liminal times and spaces between and around events that allow people to form relationships.
Which is why meals are so important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meals are where those kinds of conversations take place. And and I think that's why Jesus is often showing up and the guy's eating, right?
Yeah.
Like what our ministry, the central act of worship is the table. And like that's what it's about. And those are the spaces where the relationships are formed. That's where the community is built.
And I think there's so many things around the things we're talking about now, how it relates to Advent and Christmas for people, gathering around a table, being seen and known, that sense of belonging. All these are things that we experience around our tables, however large or small they might be, or how there might be someone missing from the table this year. All these things are part of our experience as humans. And Advent and Christmas, for me, really help focus in on that in some ways. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about, for you all, again, we're talking about what makes Christmas Christmas in some ways. I'd love to hear about you all and sort of your work at Oak Grove and at Mercy Community Church, and what makes Christmas Christmas for you. So is there something, Pastor Chad, that is like quintessentially Christmas for you and for your folks?
Christmas at Mercy, it's one of the things when you're talking about not having shelter, not having housing, and you create a welcoming space, right, with a table, all the things that we've been talking about, then that begins to take upon itself the shape of home.
Yes.
Right. And so creating that kind of family home, and, sometimes our folks have said, man, we're a really dysfunctional family. But dysfunction aside, we're still family, right? Because all of us are broken. All of us are struggling. All of us have our things that we're working through. And so I think the main thing is continuing to create home around that season. When you get back to this idea of mission, and I'll put it in air quotes, versus like the genuine sort of missional thrust of what it is to simply be human and to be Christian, a follower of Jesus. We see everybody at Christmas. And I want to see you the rest of the year. I see you the rest of the year. And that's what makes it beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying don't do special things at Christmas. It's beautiful, right? We do want to celebrate that feast of the birth of Christ, but Christmas is the day that should change every other day, right? So that it isn't the Christmas Carol thing where we have to have ghosts of past, present, and future to remind us that, we should take care of each other. Human beings matter, Sure. We matter each day of the year. So I would say the sense of home and family that's there 24/7, 365 days a week, of being present to one another. I think that's one of the main things. And we do a lot of, we do all this stuff. We decorate our trees. We do art. I think one of the things that a lot of folks don't realize that we do in our communities, we do a lot of art because living isn't just surviving, right? We need the essentials to survive, and that's fundamental. But then it's about thriving. It's about the beauty of life. It's about the joy of life. It's about being able to be a creative participant in life. Our whole space, depends on how you see it, but I would say you walk into our space, it's an assault upon the eyes of so many beautiful things happening. Yeah. I think they're beautiful. Sure. But there's just a lot of art that's just everywhere, and that's just part of who we are.
And music. Pastor Chad is a very talented musician and will often play, and almost always there's someone who picks up a drum or sings some harmony or joins in. Yeah. And that's just wonderful.
In rhythm or out of tune, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a gentleman who used to just sing real loud, Dave, and didn't matter what notes he sang. It was so joyous to hear him.
From the heart, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's that joyful noise, And so all these things we do together, where it's the eating together, it's the singing together, and it's, we have Advent songs and Christmas songs, and we do some pretty nice versions of all those. But, we do the kids stuff, we do whatever. It's just about celebrating. We do the 12 days of Christmas. And, it's the beauty of it is how bad we are at it, right? That's the beauty, is because you get a group of people together, it's like, oh, we forgot to say our part, or what is our part, or what day of Christmas are we? It's like all those things are part of our Christmas traditions that are really important to us. Yeah.
Virginia, are there things for you that make Christmas Christmas, either around here at Oak Grove or in your experience, like on the Fridays going down with the mobile group?
Well, one thing at Oak Grove that I love is singing Silent Night at the end of the Christmas Eve service with our candles. There is just something so feeling about that. I asked my kids once, my grown kids, what was important for them on Christmas, and they said, "Oh, you always make cinnamon raisin bread." I had no idea that was a big deal.
Wow.
We do lots of other things, but
Right.
any small group here tends to do a party or a celebration of some kind where you really have a longer period of time to talk with people and not just be rushed.
Sure. I think that's magical and meaningful. Yeah.
And the things you don't even realize that make an impression.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Now I really want some of your cinnamon raisin bread. What are some of the ways people can find some about Mercy Church and about also your music? As we mentioned, like there's a YouTube channel with some music on it of you doing some things. So tell us some about that.
Yeah. So again, it's not exactly polished, but yeah, if you're interested in our music, go to YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can click right over to our page, which I'm pretty sure is Mercy ATL.
Awesome. We'll put it in the show notes so you can find it there. Yeah.
But yeah, we are on Instagram. We are on Facebook. We've kind of taken a bit of a break from social media, so we're actually getting back on it. So by the time folks are watching this, they'll probably see a bit more content that's more recent. Yeah. Because we're trying to get back into it. We've really been kind of focusing just on the community and the day-to-day work. Yeah. But those are good places. We have an email you can sign up for where we try to share things that are happening in the community. But those resources are available online, whether it's our website or things we'll be publishing as we go along. So yeah, it's, as you said, communication, it's about it's not just the story, but it's how we tell the story. And so always trying to do our best to tell what we know is a beautiful story about our community. And so, if you guys want to check it out, please do.
Absolutely. And again, our church partners with a number of folks, and you're one of those groups and agencies we work with, but also it's such an opportunity for us as a church and for our people. So thank you. It matters a lot.
I remember when our families were making sandwiches and someone asked me, well, do I have to really use that much meat? Can I just make it, and I told that story to Pastor Chad and he goes, oh, is that how you'd make a sandwich for Jesus? Yeah. And it was really an interesting thought. I did not say that.
Things Pastor Chad said.
But it is. I feel like when we're with these folks, we are with Jesus. That's exactly who we're communicating with.
Yeah. Well, because we're created in God's image. Right. Dre in our community will always remind us, made in God's image, made in His image. And that's because that's a theme of ours. So that every human being we encounter there's a sense of holiness, right? And
absolutely.
It's about seeing that, and as you were talking about earlier, about seeing and knowing that we are loved, that we are beloved, that we are created in God's image, and who we are is not who we are on our worst day. Whether it's an act of violence or it's, some frustration that kind of takes over our thinking. It's about who we know ourselves to be, and you only discover that in relationship.
I remember one time you told me that the hardest thing to get across to folks is that God loves them. Absolutely. Because they're often told, "Oh, you're a bum." And Pastor Chad has a song he wrote where the chorus says, "You are a child of God, you are beloved." Yeah. And I remember one day he was singing that, and there was a gentleman standing off to the side crying. Mm-hmm. And I think he was really kind of hearing for the first time that he was a child of God and he was beloved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we call. There's the old saying, somebody calls me everything but a child of God. And I think that's what we do. And we tend to, in our culture, we tend to blame the victim. If you're poor, it must be your fault, rather than looking at our system, and recognizing, wait a minute, this is the wealthiest nation, not only in the world, but like in the history of nations. Like something's not right if we can't give the basic care to one another that we deserve. Yeah. It's not doing something that's nice or, oh, look how wonderful I am. It's about justice. It's about doing the right thing. If I've got food and you're hungry, I share it. If I've got space and you have nowhere to go, I share it. If I got clothing and you don't have it, then I share it.
And I see that generosity among the folks
in our community,
because there will be times when we've given out all our food, and someone will show up late. And we'll say, oh, I'm sorry, we gave it all away. And someone else will say, well, here, you can have my cookies, and because I already had a sandwich, so
Yeah.
and I that generosity, people who really have very little will be the most generous
Yes.
at times.
Yes, because we all have something to give, right? It goes back to that mutuality and recognizing that the gifts already reside within the community, and how can we honor that? And yeah,
Well, this is my favorite Pastor Chad story, but you don't have to put that in there.
oh dear,
This was years ago. We were sitting on the street eating, and there was a gentleman who was very agitated and very, very upset. And he
he
decided,
wasn't happy with me.
yeah, he was taking it out on Pastor Chad. I don't speak Spanish, but I do know what Diablo means. And he was in Pastor Chad's face, calling him Diablo and being really mad. Actually took Pastor Chad's hat off and threw it. And after he had finished his rant and was walking away, Pastor Chad looks at him and says, "Love you, man. See you Sunday."
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was just going to follow up on the end of your story that you were telling, because it's a beautiful story. Is not necessarily a beautiful moment, but the key there is there's a relationship, right?
Yes.
So, like, the story it can be told as an incident, and it was, but it's an incident in a larger
oh yes,
context,
because
right?
he was there on Sunday, the following Sunday, and he was just as happy to see you.
Exactly.
It just depends.
Yeah. So you have to respond to people seeing that image of God in them and knowing, like, I know who you are. And I know what you're doing now is not indicative of your truest self.
Right.
And so it's
Right.
loving people through that. And I think that's who we're called to be.
That's right.
Well, like you said, family has all the things.
Has all the
and it's not always the bright, shiny. That's
No.
the Instagram realities are not real.
or not yet.
So I think that's the part about real community. And Jesus, again, didn't get accused of being a glutton and a drunkard in Luke for no reason. He hung out with lots of people who society and religion didn't always value and see meaningfulness in.
Yeah.
And that's a
absolutely.
huge part of our story as Christians, but also our call in mission and service and the ways we live out our faith in the world. That's a big part of our vision statement of connecting with each other,
Absolutely.
growing our faith, and living out our faith in the world is all these mission partners we work with and groups and agencies that help us have the opportunity as members of the church and community to get involved, to do some of the work and to help them do some of the work that God is doing in your communities.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. So every time we do a coat drive here at Oak Grove, every time we do our Spooky to Be Hungry food drive, all these things that we have happening throughout the year help support and help us stay tethered with you all, again, in addition to the weekly sandwich making on Thursdays. And I want to hear some more, Virginia, about how folks can get involved with some of the things that Oak Grove is doing with Mercy. So could you share a little bit about sort of Thursdays and Fridays, what that looks like, and how they might get in contact with you or someone else about it?
Anyone who wants to come and make sandwiches on Thursdays, show up in the back of Fellowship Hall at 1:00. You don't have to make a reservation. You don't have to ask anybody. Just show up. Show up.
Yeah.
People who are there are friendly, and they will get you some gloves and some peanut butter and teach you how to make sandwiches for us. And
Make sure you have the proper amount of meat on the sandwich.
Yes, exactly.
The thing is, like, you want to eat the sandwich. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Then that's going to be good. Yeah.
we make them really, really well
Yes, you
now.
do. Yes, you
And
do.
and the
And then on
guy-
Fridays, tell us some about sort of how that process might work or how people can get connected.
Fridays are really fun. Considering we're really pretty much finished in 2 hours, it's not a big deal. But we load everything onto the bus, and drive to several stops, and just hand out food, chat, visit.
Yeah. So what time
Hang
at
out.
the church and around sort of roughly on and how they get in contact with you about it?
On Fridays, you can just come to the back of the church, the back of the kitchen at noon.
Okay.
It is good to let us know if you're coming, so we'll wait for you. My contact information's in Shelby, and please come and participate. Have fun sometime.
Yeah. And,
The Soup Sisters love guests.
Yeah. Soup Sisters is mostly women. There are some guys who come. And so I do want to give a shout out for that. If you're interested in that, Pastor Amy and our missions team, you can email missions@ogumc.org. And that gets to our mission coordinators and teams that work with all of our different partners and agencies, but also our pastoral staff to make sure that works. And so anytime we're doing that coat drive, that sort of thing, the Thursday lunch team, you can come be a part of that, as well as the Friday opportunities. And again, you can always find anything on the church website about missions and service. You can go to ogumc.org/missions, and you can find all the things we do on one page. So if you're someone looking for something meaningful to do in this holiday season, to use some of your time, whether you got time off or you just got time, for you, for your family, intergenerationally, we have a whole host of ways people will get involved and living out your faith in a way that connects you with some of the folks that Jesus is still hanging out with and wanting us to hang out with during this time and season. The last thing I'll say for our church is we have an Advent offering that we collect. It's a special offering that people give to and helps support all of our missions and opportunities and partnerships, and helps fund a whole host of things, including some of our work with Mercy and our sandwich making and all those things too. Well, again, thank you for being here, Pastor Chad and Virginia. So again, you find all the mercyatl.org to find the website for Mercy Community Church, as well as all their internet things. We'll have it all here in the show notes for us. Glad to work on staff with you, Virginia, and be in community with you here, and for Pastor Chad to be here to, again, help us have some of the backstory of how our church and our community work together with folks across Atlanta to help us understand more about how God is at work in communities that we don't always live in or associate with, but allows us that opportunity to see Christ and to be seen.
Absolutely. Amen. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being on today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
We'll plan to see you in the next episode next week. Thanks for being here, y'all. Peace. Our prayers are with Mercy Community Church and Pastor Chad as they have all experienced a tragic death in the community this week.